Out of nowhere, Carlos Sainz has been thrown back into the McLaren conversation, sparking a frenzy of speculation across the Formula One paddock. The source? A rather eye-opening set of comments made by Zak Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, which sent shockwaves through the F1 community and set social media ablaze. At a time when both of McLaren's current drivers, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, are actively embroiled in a fierce fight for the Drivers' Championship, Brown's remarks carry a heavy weight beneath their surface. His words weren't just casual musings. They hinted at something deeper, the possibility that one of McLaren's current stars could be heading for the exit door. And if such a scenario unfolds, the question practically writes itself: which of the two would be shown the way out? Realistically, it's not hard to guess. McLaren has taken a massive leap forward with their most recent upgrades. The MCL38 has turned into a title-contending machine, sleek, fast, and consistent, but with great performance comes a new problem: internal competition. The team now finds itself with two elite drivers, both hungry, both talented, and both still needing to prove they can go all the way and clinch a world title. That's a recipe for fireworks. And once one of them breaks through and becomes a world champion, the other, by default, will be pushed onto the back foot. In such high-pressure environments, tensions are inevitable. When egos, ambition, and championship aspirations collide, history tells us the garage can become a battlefield. As harmony starts to crack, it's only natural that a driver may begin to eye opportunities elsewhere, or, in this case, Zak Brown might be preparing for that very outcome. It's against this backdrop that Brown's comments on Carlos Sainz feel loaded with intent. When asked about a potential reunion with the Spaniard, Zak didn't dodge the question. Quite the opposite. He leaned into it with refreshing honesty. If we found ourselves with an opening, we would absolutely consider Carlos. That said, we currently have Lando and Oscar signed for multiple years. But if circumstances shift and Carlos becomes available, I have his number on speed dial. Those words may sound diplomatic on the surface, but they say a lot more when read between the lines. Brown didn't just praise Sainz as a great driver, he called him a friend. He reflected warmly on their time together and pointed out, in no uncertain terms, that it was Sainz who chose to leave McLaren, not the other way around. That distinction matters, because it flips the narrative. Any so-called grudge would technically rest with McLaren, not Sainz. And yet, Brown seems more than willing to bury any old tensions if the opportunity to bring Sainz back arises sooner rather than later. It may sound far-fetched to envision Sainz in papaya orange again, especially given how tightly McLaren seems to be locked into the Piastri-Norris pairing, particularly after Oscar's contract extension was announced. But in Formula One, stability is often a mirage. The fiercest rivalries tend to be born within the same team, and the dynamic between Piastri and Norris is slowly beginning to resemble just that, a civil war in the making. As the battle for supremacy intensifies, there's a growing sense that the team might not be able to keep both drivers satisfied in the long term. The smarter move, from Zak Brown's perspective, might be to keep all options open, including a potential Sainz comeback. After all, Brown has shown he's not afraid to think strategically and long-term. And with Carlos becoming a free agent at the end of the season, and Ferrari turning the page with Lewis Hamilton, the stars could align faster than we think. It's also worth noting the timing. These kinds of discussions don't usually emerge so early in the season, especially not when one of your drivers, Piastri, is still in the process of solidifying his presence at the top of the field. Yet that's precisely what makes this story so intriguing. Brown isn't speaking out of desperation, he's speaking from foresight. He knows this sport is brutally transactional. Today's harmony can quickly turn into tomorrow's mutiny. In Formula One, no seat is safe. Contracts? They're just paper, easy to tear, easy to rewrite. Allegiances shift. Plans evolve. If there's even a whisper of internal tension, team bosses begin to strategize, and sometimes they do so years in advance. So yes, Zak Brown's phone has Carlos Sainz's name saved in it. That little detail speaks volumes. It means the bridge between McLaren and Sainz was never fully burned. And if the internal rivalry within McLaren escalates, if one driver starts pulling ahead and the other starts looking sideways, don't be surprised if that contact gets dialed. The future of McLaren may very well hinge on how long this current duo can coexist. Because if the partnership starts to fracture under the weight of championship ambition, Brown already seems to have a plan B, and that plan B might come with a Spanish accent. Carlos Sainz has suddenly found himself at the center of speculation linking him with a sensational return to McLaren, all sparked by a set of unexpected remarks from Zak Brown that have sent shockwaves throughout the Formula One paddock. At a time when both Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are firmly in the hunt for the Drivers' Championship, comments like these carry far more weight than they may seem at first glance. Zak Brown appears to be bracing for the possibility of having to part ways with one of his current drivers, a reality that, if it comes to pass, poses a critical question. Who would be the one to go? The answer may not be as ambiguous as some think. McLaren has raised the bar significantly with its latest evolution of the car, positioning itself as a genuine contender for both titles. However, such progress often comes with unintended consequences. The team now finds itself with two top-tier drivers, both immensely talented, but both still needing to prove they can convert potential into championship glory. And once one of them succeeds in doing so, the balance within the team will inevitably tilt. The other will be forced into a reactive stance. In such high-stakes dynamics, internal frictions become almost inevitable. Ego, ambition, and the pursuit of supremacy tend to ignite tension. So if either Norris or Piastri feels sidelined or eclipsed, the natural instinct may be to look elsewhere for a more favorable environment. This very scenario seems to have been contemplated by Zak Brown, as evidenced by his recent admission that a reunion with Carlos Sainz is not off the table. Speaking candidly, the McLaren boss said, "If we ended up with an opening, Carlos would definitely be on our radar. Right now, we have both Lando and Oscar signed for multiple years. But if the situation changes and Carlos becomes available, I've got his number saved." That wasn't just polite diplomacy, it was a calculated statement. Brown wasn't merely acknowledging Sainz's talent. He was reminding everyone that Carlos left McLaren of his own accord, not the other way around. That distinction makes a difference. If there were ever a reason to harbor resentment, it would lie with the team, not the driver. Yet, Brown clearly seems ready to set the past aside should the opportunity to reunite arise. Of course, picturing Carlos Sainz back at McLaren, and by extension, imagining either Piastri or Norris stepping away, still feels like a stretch, particularly after Oscar's recent contract renewal. But in F1, circumstances can flip overnight. And the brewing rivalry between the current McLaren pair may be closer to boiling over than anyone is willing to admit. This kind of internal competition can push a team to new heights, but it can also destabilize the foundations if not handled carefully. Brown seems to be well aware of this possibility and is already laying the groundwork for an alternative future. That future may include a driver he already knows well, trusts deeply, and has a proven relationship with, Carlos Sainz. What's especially intriguing is the timing. Normally, talks like this don't emerge so early in the season, particularly when one of your drivers, in this case, Piastri, is quietly turning into a formidable title threat. But then again, F1 is as much about strategic foresight as it is about raw speed. And in this sport, driver contracts are little more than temporary agreements, easy to change, easy to break. At the end of the day, Zak Brown's comments suggest something bigger than just admiration for Sainz. They hint at a broader awareness that stability at McLaren may be tested soon, that long-term harmony between Norris and Piastri isn't guaranteed, and that having a reliable plan B, someone like Carlos, could be vital in maintaining the team's upward trajectory. Because in Formula One, success comes at a cost. And sometimes, the price is having to let go of one driver to make room for another, one who's been there before and might be the answer again. Exit clauses are an integral part of nearly every contract signed in Formula One, and recent developments between Max Verstappen and Red Bull have highlighted just how significant they can be. Reportedly, the partnership between Verstappen and Red Bull could be severed if Max fails to finish within the top 3 in the Drivers' Championship, a scenario that is not far-fetched given the fierce development war currently engulfing the grid. With that in mind, there's no reason to believe that McLaren's drivers don't have similar clauses embedded within their deals. Earlier this year, when Oscar Piastri renewed his contract with McLaren, it was widely reported that his manager, Mark Webber, fought hard for a key stipulation. Oscar should never have to worry about being designated a number 2 within the team. As long as he delivers on performance, team orders should be off the table. In short, McLaren's infamous team hierarchy rules, once ironclad, have been loosened to allow greater flexibility. Regardless, the battle between Piastri and Lando Norris is only expected to intensify as the season unfolds. Addressing the looming rivalry in more detail, Zak Brown commented, "I think it's a matter of when, not if. Whether they're teammates or not, over 24 races you're bound to get a wheel-banging moment. Someone's going to block, someone's going to push. Personally, I'd rather just get it over with because it's not as dramatic as everyone makes it out to be. I expect a racing incident. It's inevitable. These are two bold personalities. Neither of them is reckless, so we're not overly concerned. But yeah, in some ways, I'm looking forward to clearing the air." Now, what would it take for Carlos Sainz to truly consider a return to McLaren? After all, this is the team he left behind back in 2020, a move that seemed reasonable at the time but has since taken on new context as McLaren has grown into a consistent frontrunner. Ironically, just as Ferrari began turning the tide in their own favor, Sainz's spot was handed over to Lewis Hamilton for 2025. And although Carlos has recently aligned himself with a long-term vision at Williams, that plan might no longer be the ideal scenario for a driver of his caliber, a 3-time Grand Prix winner hungry for more. That's why Brown's subtle invitation now feels both strategic and disruptive. It might just be enough to tempt Sainz away from his original path and Williams' long-term roadmap, especially if McLaren shows genuine interest. Publicly, Carlos seems content at Williams. If we take his words at face value, he's emotionally invested in the team, even describing it as a childhood dream. In his own words, "When I was 10, just falling in love with Formula One, which teams did I fantasize about driving for one day? Ferrari, McLaren, and Williams. It would mean the world to me to bring Williams back to the podium." But nostalgia doesn't guarantee leadership. Returning to McLaren wouldn't automatically make Sainz the de facto number 1, especially with Norris and Piastri already deeply in sync with the current car. The battle for supremacy within the team would be just as fierce, if not fiercer than before. And considering Mercedes power units are expected to lead the field under the 2026 engine regulations, the competitive outlook for McLaren looks even more promising. Meanwhile, Williams is reportedly the first team to pivot its entire development focus toward 2026. Although they have a decent platform lined up for 2025, their real ambition lies in launching the new regulations from a position of strength. That's the long game, but it might not align perfectly with Sainz's timeline or competitive urgency. Reflecting on his transition from Ferrari to Williams and the challenges that came with adapting to the Mercedes power unit, Sainz explained, "I can talk a bit about Abu Dhabi and how that first lap felt. The thing you notice most when you change teams is the engine, how the power delivery kicks in. The vibrations, the sound, even the feel, it's all completely different. This transition is more than just technical. It's emotional, psychological, and symbolic." Sainz isn't just switching machinery. He's reinventing his identity as a driver. But with Zak Brown's door slightly ajar and McLaren's momentum building, the question becomes, how long before Carlos reconsiders where he truly belongs? So, even though I went out on track trying to understand the aerodynamics, the tires, and the general mechanical feel of the car, the one thing that stood out in those first few laps was just how different a power unit can feel. It's a whole new experience. But let's cut to the real question. Who's feeling the heat at McLaren right now? Without a doubt, the pressure is mounting on Lando Norris. Coming into this season, he probably knew that the competition with Piastri would be close, but he never expected it to be this close. Piastri is currently the only multiple race winner of the 2025 season, something not even Verstappen has achieved so far. On top of that, he's made history as the first Australian to lead the World Championship in years. The momentum is clearly in his favor, and from now on, every race will feel like a head-to-head battle between these two. Last year, the star of McLaren's season was Norris. He consistently outperformed Piastri across nearly every metric. But what he's still lacking, and what may ultimately define his fate, is the mental resilience required to clinch a world championship. This isn't meant as a personal attack. It's simply a fair observation. He crumbled during the sprint qualifying session in China, and don't even get me started on that shaky first lap during Q3 in Jeddah. That's precisely why former F1 world champion Alan Jones believes Piastri has what it takes to defeat Norris, because of what he sees as a psychological vulnerability in the British driver. In his words, Lando is fast, no doubt. But mentally, I think he's fragile. He's always talking about having mental issues, focusing too much on setbacks rather than his strengths. And when a driver starts speaking like that, you know they're shaken. Helmut Marko echoed the same sentiment, stating that this mental weakness could be the very thing that prevents Norris from ever winning the championship. And let's not forget, this year, Lando not only has to face Piastri, but also deal with the return of a more threatening Max Verstappen. That makes two title rivals instead of one, unlike the previous season, which was practically tailor-made for Lando to shine. So, considering everything, here's the big question. Do you believe Carlos Sainz could realistically return to McLaren? And if that were to happen, who do you think would be forced out to make room for the three-time Grand Prix winner? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what you think. And once you've done that, don't forget to click on the video popping up on your screen right now.